You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm Ashley Hargrave, joined this week by Oliver Camacho. All right, this week we go inside the huddle with Marshall Pynkowski and Jeannette Lajeunesse Zingg, co-artistic directors of Opera Atelier, the company that is built in the reputation of lavish productions of opera from the French Baroque and is now set to present Pelléas and Melisande? Plus, in the 2-minute drill, violinist Lara settles a lawsuit and preservationists sue to protect the Kennedy Center. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify. You're going to click follow. On Apple Podcasts, you hit the plus sign. You can also stream episodes of OBS every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Central at amplisoundsradio.com. You can also email us your hot takes by writing to mailbag@operaboxscore.com or upload a voice memo using the You Got Something to Say tab on our website, which is operaboxscore.com. However you contribute, you will get an OBS beer coaster, OBS lapel pin, and a #1 OBS fan foam finger just for sharing your own hot take. A little bit of skeleton crew this week. Oliver Camacho, how you doing?
I'm okay. And Carlos Alcaraz's early loss in the Miami Open, I take it as my responsibility. It's my fault because I was traveling and I wasn't paying attention to the tournament. And I tuned in just enough time to watch him lose. It was devastating. But the reason why I wasn't paying attention is because I had just gotten back from my whirlwind trip to New York, where I saw the Lafont competition on the day I arrived, Madame Butterfly with Eileen Perez and Andrei Filonchek, and Matthew Polenzani, all friends of the show. And then Traviata with Lisette Oropeza the following day. And the last day of my trip, friend of the show, Lisa Davidson and Michael Spires in Tristan und Isolde. I'll have more to say about writing about Tristan and Isolde in the Good Call, Bad Call, but there are some think pieces out there that we thought we had put in the news, but they're really not news. I will say this, that it was pretty amazing for the Met to have that lineup for 3 days in a row. Artists who will be identified with those roles: Eileen Perez as Cho-Cho-san, Lisette as Violetta, and Lisa Davidson as Isolde, and for that matter, Michael Spires as Tristan. That's pretty incredible if you are somebody traveling for opera and you get to see those 3 performances in a row. Interesting thing happened on the night that I saw Tristan. So they staged the prelude, which is, take it or leave it. But the prelude has Michael Spires and Lisa Davidson sitting at a table facing each other with an hourglass between them. And during this very famous prelude music, Lisa Davidson is supposed to turn an hourglass upside down to let the sand start dripping. And on this particular performance, the hourglass shattered in her hand. It's a huge hourglass. It must weigh like 10 pounds or something like that.
Oh, my God.
And the sand was not distributed in a way that made it easier for her to do that motion.
Oh, my God.
And we all saw the glass shatter and hit the ground, and she played it so cool. But it was clear that something was wrong, and the stage manager came out and stopped the performance. And, they made us all wait. And I was just thinking the whole time, what if Lisa Davidson has to go to the hospital and get stitches? And all these people, the house was packed. What if all these people had to hear a cover who thought they were home free because it was, 6:32 and Lisa Davidson was on stage. God. So I'm fine today, I mean, thank goodness that Lisa Davidson toughed it out. I'm sure she had to clean up and put some Band-Aids on. But very lucky that she didn't need stitches for that. But I was terrified for her because I've had a hand injury recently with glass, and it doesn't seem like it's that bad, but then it doesn't stop bleeding.
Right. Yeah. That's one of those appendages that doesn't quit. Oliver, I did not realize you were seeing all of those things back to back to back to back. What a whirlwind of a trip. Have you slept since you got back?
Yeah. I mean, that's the way I travel. I need museums. I need restaurants. I need shows,
You need to turn and burn.
Yeah, but it's true that I've been really tired since I've been back because I've just been back to the grind, and who knows when I'll rest. And then it's Holy Week for singers, and that's a whole other ball of wax. So I'll sleep next Monday.
That's true. It is also pushing the end of March as we record, which means that March Madness is almost over. It means that the Final Four is set, and it is lame. Okay, it's not really lame, but I am still pretty mad about the Arkansas-Arizona game and then eventually the Arizona-Purdue games of last week, and that no SEC teams are left in the Final Four. It's been a very depressing week to be a Razorbacks fan, even though it always is. I actually got to watch the game. I was on family vacation, and we just all sat in our collective disappointment and then did touristy things the next day and then watched Arizona further beat Purdue, which was somehow more depressing. At any rate, we are moving on from college basketball and we are on to rugby season because Major League Rugby begins on April 3rd. Yes, men with accents built like refrigerators running into each other in tiny shorts. What's not to love? At any rate, let's talk some opera.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
Opera Box Score has offered a variety of content from Opera Atelier throughout the years, including interviews with one of their star bass baritones, Douglas Williams, who's also known for his performances at Boston Early Music Festival. We featured one of their star sopranos, Mireille Asselin, and their former executive director, Alexandra Skotchalis. Now we get to present the co-artistic directors who will tell you more about Opera Atelier. But the surprise is that this company, which is known for their 17th and 18th century lavish performances, historically informed performances that are very centered on dance, that they would do an opera that doesn't seem to have any dance in it.
Literally not a toe tapper in my mind.
But they will explain why they are presenting Pelléas and Melisande April 15th through 19th. The cast features Douglas Williams as Golo, Megan Lindsay as Melisande, and friend of the show, Antonin Ronpierre as Pelléas, and Misha Brugers-Gosman in the role of Geneviève. I will say that after the recording concluded, I wanted to talk to Marshall and Jeannette about Douglas Williams, who is a friend of the show and an artist who I simply adore. And I apologize, I didn't capture this on the recording, but we talked about the role of Golo and how hard it must be to perform that role because this guy is such a jerk. And, he has to be violent towards Melisande on stage. And I know Douglas as a very sensitive, dare I say, poetic person. And I worry that this is going to be, hard for him to perform violence on stage. And they go for it. Like, you'll hear them talk about it. Like Marshall and Jeannette, they want the audience to know the story and they do things explicitly. So I assume it's going to be terrifying for the audience to watch this because Douglas is also like 6'4" and like doesn't have an ounce of body fat on him. And like, that's right. So anyway, Douglas, if you're listening to this, just know that we still love you and you can't trick us into thinking you're a jerk. We know that you're a lovely, lovely person. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Marshall Pynkowski and Jeannette Lajeunesse Zingg. Marshall and Jeannette, welcome to Opera Box Score.
Thank you.
Delighted to be here.
Well, I know the story of Opera Atelier, and I've been a fan for many years, but since maybe people in our audience might not know the brand, can you give us the elevator pitch for Opera Atelier?
Well, let me tell you, we never intended to found a Baroque or period opera ballet company, which is probably one of the reasons why it's so healthy and works so well. Jeannette and I are both dancers. Our background was in dancing, although we have strong music backgrounds. And the long and the short of it is we started to attend concerts being given by Tafel Music 40 years ago when they were just beginning to cut their teeth.
And you were just 10 years old at that time. So.
Of course. I mean, our parents were bringing us. We were overwhelmed by the music that we were hearing. We both had strong music educations. We thought we knew what the great composers were, what the great where the great masterpieces were. And suddenly hearing music, and remember, 40 years ago, no one heard music by Rameau, Lully, Charpentier, Monteverdi. This was all new. And we felt like we had been hit by a truck. And particularly when we started hearing dance music from the period. And we started wondering just, what are the dances of this period? This isn't classical ballet. This is pre-ballet. And these are big ballets that exist. Ballets sometimes that were full of singing. And then sometimes operas that were full of dancing. And it was our own general interest that made us decide we were going to do our own research, first at the Museum of, or rather at Performing Arts Library, yes, at the Juilliard. But then all of our friends had always told us, Marshall, Jeannette, if you want to go to France, just audition for the Moulin Rouge, the Folies Bergère, the Lido, or the Crazy Horse. They will take you at once. Your height, your dancing, everything. We auditioned for the Moulin Rouge. We got our working papers at once. We went back the next year, and we actually had some letters of introduction from the Royal Ontario Museum, friends at the conservatory, and we were able to dance at the club at night, extremely well paid, lived on Jeanette's paycheck, sent mine back home, and during the day we were able to research everything we could put our hands on about Baroque opera and ballet. Came back to Toronto, we did some some demonstrations in the galleries of the Royal Ontario Museum. They were just Jeannette and me wearing costumes that friends had made who had just graduated from the National Theatre School, and a CD player of Tafel music. So many people were attending. We were doing 3 shows a day on Sundays. The fire marshal told us we were a fire hazard, moved us into the lecture hall. Same thing after about a year and a half, Tafel music playing with us, everyone working for free. We were kicked out. Too many people were attending. We went to the Art Gallery of Ontario. Same thing in Walker Court until about a year, 2 years later, we were told we had to leave. We were a security risk. Went to the Macmillan Theatre, and while we were there, David Mirvish, bless his heart, phoned us and said, you people need a real theatre, and I'm putting you in the Royal Alex to see what we can do. And he changed our lives. We were there until we moved into the Elgin and then started touring, and we have had the busiest international touring schedule of any theatre company in Canadian history. I'm really proud to say. And we continue to tour, we continue to produce, and now we're adding Kerner Hall, a transformed Kerner Hall, as one of our venues.
Well, there are so many threads I want to pull on that you've dropped, but I want to just reiterate that your work is visual work. Like, you work in a visual format, and of course the music is of utmost importance, and you put on top level music performances. But I think what people love about Opera Atelier is that's always a feast for the eyes. You care so much about all the aspects of what the audience is going to see, the set design, the beautiful paintings, the costumes, which are just dripping with luxury, and of course movement. And it feels like to me that you cast based on the singer's ability to move. Like, I've never seen anybody in your performance who's just a park and barker. Not that I have anything against park and bark. If you can deliver a top level music performance and you have to stand still to do it, go for it, But I've never felt like that's what you were going to offer as an Opera Atelier.
Now, people have to be willing to take a risk. They need to be so sure of their voice. They can't be afraid of their voice being fragile. Sometimes they have to be willing to take the risk and let their voice even fall apart, because dramatically and physically it's necessary. Everyone knows our singers can sing. These are great, great voices. They need to be able to do something more than sing. And we expect so much of them. And if you don't love it, then the people who work with us love working with us. We're not out to proselytize. We don't want to change opera. We're not trying to make people be something they're not. You have to love rehearsing. You have to love being physical. And you have to love working together, not waiting for your downbeat, working together.
Yep. And you were talking about wanting to research the Baroque dance forms, and I've been lucky in that I've been able to see your shows, but also shows at Boston Early Music Festival. They did like a Lully Sichet back in 2007, which just blew my mind. And I've also been a participant of the Amherst Early Music Festival, which also has a dance program, and have been in operas where, here's a dance, so make space for the dancers, Yeah. And it's a real collaboration, and the dancers have equal billing. And you get to watch, how this music is actually working. Like you understand the rhythm forms and, the class structure that's within the dance. And it informs so much of the narrative. And then when you get to a composer like Mozart, where he's playing with these ideas of class and using, dance form to, tell the audience the subtext. And, nowadays we have to really spell it out for the audience. But back in the 18th century, the audience heard the contra dance. They knew, oh, that's a peasant dance, And so this is the work that you do, and you make very explicit for the audience so they can really get the full story, which I appreciate so much. I love the way you tell stories. But you made your bread and butter on French Baroque and 17th century opera. Can you talk about how you expanded into, Mozart, and now we're going to talk about in a second 20th century opera?
It's not as much of a jump as what you might imagine. When we first produced Magic Flute in 1991, it's hard to imagine now, that created a sensation. There were people who were furious that we were going into classical repertoire, saying, that's not period production. You should be doing ancient music. There were people who were thrilled, but it was very, very divided. Eventually, everyone got over it and realized that Tafelmusik Opera Atelier had something to say, something important to say, not putting anyone else down, but something different, a different voice. By the time we did Freischütz, the same thing happened 14 years ago. People were saying, Freischütz, how can you possibly do Freischütz? Same thing. It was a revelation for them, for us, for everyone. After Freischütz, we were really feeling great about redefining what period production meant. That it's not just ancient music. Anything can be a period production. It's about intent. And that's when I went to Jean Lamont and said, Jean, would you ever consider Jean as the artistic director of Tafelmusik?
Rest in peace.
Tafelmusik, a company or play for a production of Pelléas and Melisande. And Jean said, Marshall, what company in the world would be better equipped to interpret Debussy's music than a company steeped in the tradition of French Baroque repertoire? And that's the key. Debussy loved French Baroque music. He adored Rameau. He loved Lully. Those are the building blocks of who he is. We've all grown up thinking he's the father of jazz and we're looking ahead. There's no sense looking ahead. The future didn't exist for Debussy. The past did. The past was real. And it's why Pelléas has become weirder and weirder and weirder, because no one knows what to do with it. They think it's strange. Let's make it strange. Forget about it being strange. It is strange. Let's look where he came from. He came from a tradition of French Baroque repertoire, and that's our base. That's what we build on. It's the most natural thing in the world. And for Jeannette to be, you talk about the choreography.
Well, are you ready for that?
Yes, please.
Okay. In Pelléas and Melisande, there's quite a bit of dancing. Because it's a symbolist opera, it works very well to have abstract dancing representing various symbols. Of the dark forest, we have a beautiful male dancer playing Eros. They're symbols that nobody sees, but they drive the action. And I've been able to combine Baroque dancing with more contemporary forms to make what I sort of call modern Baroque. And I have wonderful dancers that are all classical dancers at a professional level, ballet dancers, but they've also worked with me on Baroque for years. So it's become a sort of a unique amalgam of movement that I think is working very well and very, very musical.
And they add to the dreamlike atmosphere. And we want to emphasize the symbolist theater, the symbolist artist, period. It was about the unconscious. The world had got to the point that painters could paint everything. Sculptors could sculpt everything. Everyone had hit a brick wall. And they made the right decision. They decided we can't keep looking at life. The only place we can do is turn our eyes inward and look in. We have to look at our dreams. We have to look at our hallucinations, those things that don't make sense when we wake up, but when we're dreaming, they do make sense. And I'm telling you, symbolist painters, Moreau, Odilon Verdon, they were trying to paint dreams. Maeterlinck was trying to put a dream on stage when he wrote the play, Pelléas and Melisande. He hung gauze in front of the stage. He made all the actors speak in a monotone. He put the audience he blacked out the audience, which was a new innovation. They were used to being lit. He did everything to disorient. And this is really what Pelléas is. It's what the dancers help create as well. A dreamlike atmosphere. It is not linear. It's not a domestic drama. You ruin it if you try to create something linear. We play each scene. If someone says something that doesn't make sense, a lot of my dreams don't make sense, but I wake up being deeply troubled or extremely emotionally in emotional turmoil because of them. You think about them later and you think, what was that? Mm-hmm. But when Melisande turns to Pelléas and says, my hands are unwell today, there's no sense thinking about it. That's what she says. I didn't write it. She says it. We let it happen, whatever that means to you. When Pelléas runs on stage and says, I have to see my friend, what's his name?
Marcellus.
Marcellus, yes. He's written to me and he knows the exact day and the time that he's going to die. I must visit him. It's not explained. He got that letter. His friend knows the date and the time he will die. It's never mentioned again. The rest of the opera, we never hear of Marcellus. We hear nothing. These moments are dropped in that catch us off guard, and they don't even necessarily go anywhere.
It's a dark fairy tale.
Yes.
It's a little bit like Into the Woods, the Sondheim.
Yes.
We feel there are parallels, quite a few parallels. It's a fairy tale that explores the unconscious.
And remember, this is when Freud was beginning to explore at exactly the same time his theories of the forest as a metaphor for the unconscious. The Pelléas happens in a forest. There's no light. Everyone's going blind. I mean, any psychoanalyst would have a heyday with this.
Well, one of the features of Opera Atelier performances that I've seen is the form that you interpret for the audience, because the music you normally do has so much clear form that it's very easy, I think, for your mind to create vignettes and to create scenes that are based on musical forms. And also there's so much rhythm in quote unquote early music. And that's what Pelléas and Melisande sort of lacks, is clear form and rhythmic drive. So how do you address that problem? And how can we set up the expectation for the audience who know your work so well?
You know, it's interesting. The French Baroque work for us is something that is impressionistic. There are lots of loose ends. The ends are feathered. There's that quintessentially French style where one thing morphs into another. It's not Italianate at all. It's a form of its own. And I think Pelléas just takes that Debussy and takes it to its nth degree. If we follow the text, because the text does operate like a text in Monteverdi, the text gives shape. The text has a beginning, a middle, and end. We found that Pelléas has broken into very, very usable sections for us. It's not just one long dream. And you know, it has asserted itself. And for us, it is no more difficult to find shape within Debussy than it is to find shape within Monteverdi, for example.
Jeannette, do you agree with that?
Actually, not once I've listened to it more than 100 times. Yes, yeah. I have found as Stravinsky once said to a dancer, don't count, listen. So you listen for sounds, and the dancers with me, and we're all hearing cues within the music now that are quite clear. So nothing's going to be 5, 6, 7, 8, obviously, but I think they are dancing very nicely on the music, and the music is so beautiful.
And the dancers as well, they are responding to text in a very unique way there. They must know the text that is being spoken, because many of their cues are textual cues, not just music cues. And so it puts everyone on edge in a very, very exciting way. How can you not be on edge when things are changing with 3 beat rest, a 2 beat rest, a 1, another 3? I mean, you're on the edge the entire time, but it makes for an electric performance.
One of the trademarks of Opera Atelier is your commitment to having returning artists and developing your returning artists. It almost feels like you're a troupe. And we've had Douglas Williams on the show before, and the audience knows I'm crazy about Douglas Williams. And we actually recently had Antonin, who's singing Pelléas, on the show. And I'm just in love with his tone. But he's a young guy, and I don't know how much stage experience he has. I know that he's just, he's an he's a star, but I mean, doesn't have the same amount of experience as, for example, Megan does. So Megan Lindsay singing Melisande, who I haven't had on the show yet, but I've always wanted to interview. And I remember seeing her performances and just thinking she could play anything. She could play the sorceress. She could play the ingenue. She could play nobility. She could play servant. She is so versatile and such a strong actress. I don't know. Can you talk about the chemistry between these three and what you want to bring out of Antonin? And of course, please talk about Megan so that she gets her flowers.
We choose our singers with great care, not just individually, but how they are going to interact with each other. It doesn't mean that they all need to be the same age or the same level in terms of the amount of experience they've had. It has to do with how they approach their roles and how they treat each other on stage. David Mamet, who I adore as a director, he's the person who keeps saying, you have to listen, you have to answer. You can't just wait for your downbeat. You have to answer each other. And this is what we're looking with our singers. They are listening and answering. I know it sounds so basic, but it's rare. And they know exactly what each other are saying at all times. And to find people who are willing to think that the text is as important as the music, their interaction with their colleagues is as important as the music, that's a very rare animal in the opera world. We need performers who are generous with each other, generous with their time, people who love to rehearse, all of these things. Someone like Antonin, though, again, as David Mamet said, there's no sense going to opera school. There's no sense going to theater school. If you got it, you got it. If you don't, you'll never have it. It's as simple as that. You can recognize this in an audition with the right person. If you have that thing that makes text and music come alive, then the more you do it, the better you'll get. It's as simple as that. Antonin is wasting his time every moment he's not in a rehearsal studio. He is growing every moment. But you get someone who has a wonderful voice but is a block of wood, and they simply cannot make that connection in the brain. It doesn't matter how often you repeat a scene. Doesn't matter how hard you work. Doesn't mean they won't have a great career. It will be a different career. But I think these people are born. If they're born and they're lucky enough to have everything firing, you can develop it.
And Antonin has sung, he sang a leading role in David and Jonathan. Yes. That's how we met him.
Yes.
First Versailles, then we took it to Potsdam, and now here, back again in Versailles. So he has had some major roles coming his way lately.
But you're right, he's a kid. He's a kid.
Yeah.
He's in his...
I mean, I remember being his age and just being so focused on the tone production, and then to have what you guys make your singers do, all the counting and all of the, you have to have the music really in your body. Like you can't come to a rehearsal with you guys and not know the thing cold and be able to, make all the gestures and make all the, hit all the beats.
I mean, and this of all things, the kissing, the violence. We had to have someone come in from Stratford for a hair dragging session because Melisande does have to be dragged by her hair. They say it, they have to do it, and these things are important. And to get to the point that you have people who are willing to do any of those things over and over and realize that's just as important as the beauty of the sound, as their breath control, as everything else. I don't care if someone's breathless for a moment on stage because they had to run. The thrilling thing is running. And if you're breathless for a moment, so be it. And we find our way to maneuver through it. But we want people who are brave, who are not trying to be safe. I'm tired of hearing about people wanting to feel safe in rehearsal. I've never wanted to feel safe, ever. I've wanted to be at risk. I want to feel that I'm at risk. I want to feel that it's a thrilling, risky thing to be in rehearsal and to be on stage.
The last time I saw Pelléas was in Santa Fe, and Zachary Nelson, this really fantastic American baritone, was singing Golo. And he's the nicest guy. You know, I see him all the time around Chicago, and he's just a total gent. But I never looked at him the same after that scene. It's like
what a horrifying scene.
Yeah. It really wounded me. Like witnessing that and seeing people do that on stage, and I asked the mezzo, her name is Samantha Hankey, like, are you okay? Like, was that hard? It's like, well, we talk about it before we get on stage, and we hug it out afterwards, but it's so ugly. I get emotional just thinking about it,
Yeah, but you have to go there. Otherwise, you're apologizing for the work. As David Mamet said, if you don't love it, don't do it. Let someone else do it. We're doing what we love. We are so incredibly fortunate and so incredibly self-indulgent. We only do what we love. That's why we produce only twice a year. We can't afford to produce what we love more than twice
a year.
So how many weeks have you been working on this? Because I can't imagine this thing comes together that quickly.
There's been so much time because we've workshopped with singers, we've zoomed with singers. Jeannette has worked with the dancers.
We did the first scene already twice in a mixed program, so yes. We've been working on this for years, basically.
Yeah, really. And people have known that they were going to be singing these roles for at least 2 years. So it's been an ongoing dialogue. In fact, when we first went to Antonin's agent, who was a wonderful woman who was so protective of her singers, she at first said, "No, I understand he'll be a wonderful Pelléas, but he's not ready. He's too young. He can't do it." And I was so disappointed. And then I went back about 6 months later after we had worked with him again in Versailles. And I said, "Look, it's in a house of only 1,200 seats and a 14-piece orchestra." He said, "Let me speak with Antonin." And they came back and said, "Perfect. That's the right way for him to sing this role for the first time." So it's been a process, a real process with everyone.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Can you talk a little bit about the orchestration that you're using and how it was crafted and what's being left out if necessary?
Chris Bagan, who is our assistant music director, very, very unusual musician because he did his PhD on Schoenberg, but at the same time, he is one of the great harpsichordists and Baroque interpreters. Those two worlds come together for him and make complete sense for him. So when he knew that we wanted to have an excerpt from Pelléas in our production of All Is Love, we took for granted we would have 2 grand pianos, and that's what we would do. And Chris said, "No, let me take a run at this. Let's take the orchestration down to its most basic elements and see if we can't create something that really gives us some of that wonderful clarity and freshness of Debussy's piano music." And it's precisely what he has done. After we did the first act in All Is Love, really experienced people like Paula Citrin, who's chased opera all over the world her whole life. She wrote in her review, she said, "I felt like I heard Pelléas for the first time. I heard musical dissonances for the first time I never heard before." And going to live productions, which Jeannette and I have on more than one occasion, we've always come away with the same feeling. A 60 to 80 piece orchestra, it's like having a wall come at you. It's thrilling, but I can't say I'm hearing that gorgeous transparency that I think of as Debussy at his best. And I think people are going to hear Pelléas more clearly because of that reduction. This was not a cost-saving decision. This was an aesthetic decision. Because of the hall we're in, because of the singers we have, because of the size of the hall and its acoustic, we feel this is the right way for us to go.
Well, we're out of time, but I wanted to ask you one question I didn't prepare you for, but I'm pretty sure you're going to have an answer for. I'll never forget the outreach program you did in Chicago around Actéon. And it was ostensibly a program for families and for children to understand how opera is made. I feel like it is the way to teach young people and neophytes about opera without dumbing anything down. Can you just briefly go over what your strategy is for outreach like that? Because I want other opera companies to hear this podcast and say, okay, maybe Oliver and Marshall are onto something.
Our program is called Making of an Opera, and the whole idea is to introduce young people, many of whom will never have had a live theater experience before, into all of the elements that go into creating an opera. But we don't dumb it down. This is the entire thing. We think that if it's worth sharing with them, they should get the real thing. We break it down to a manageable size, and we choose with enormous care what excerpts we're going to show. But we want to break down those moments of magic that are going to fire their imaginations, whether it's seeing how does a scrim work, how does someone fly in, who makes them fly in, who are the people on headsets talking with each other. We try to break it apart so that it becomes something that it doesn't ruin the mystery, but it does make it more accessible. It's people doing it, people like them. And by having people calling cues on the stage, having it happen in front of them, having the singers come to the front of the stage and demonstrate things, I think it's so, so important that there's nothing wrong with children not understanding everything that you're doing. Sometimes it's a good thing. You give them the real goods, and they'll take away whatever they're ready to take away. I want to read you a quote. I've been reading Colette lately, that wonderful writer. And she said, "How I love things I only half understand." This is the greatest writer in France at the time. "They're even more beautiful, glimpse through the regular lattice of beautiful verses." Well, we would say, and glimpse to the regular lattice of beautiful music, beautiful dancing. But the half understood has value. And if the children take away half and are thrilled, and the rest is mystery, then I think that we've done our job.
Just a little bit of Purcell's King Arthur from an Opera Atelier show called All Is Love from 2024. Once again, Opera Atelier presents Pelléas and Melisande April 15th through the 19th at Kerner Hall in Toronto. And Ashley, you didn't hear the end of our conversation, but we were talking about their outreach program called Making an Opera, which came to Chicago when Opera Atelier presented Charpentier's Actéon at the Harris Theater. And as I said in the conversation with them, I felt like it was the ideal way to, offer educational programming to children and honestly to opera neophytes. He came out on stage, Marshall came out on stage and talked about how lights are used and how scrims are used and how the flies are used and how all those things are called by the stage manager. And then, brought out a dancer and had a little demo, brought out a singer, had a little demo, and so that the audience would understand what each component is and then put it all together in an abridged version of a French Baroque opera ballet. That's awesome. Which already is a big obstacle for most audiences, let alone for children. Yeah. But they loved it. And the parents and the people in the audience were like, this is the best, education, opera education outreach program I've ever attended. Why doesn't lyric opera do this? So I do think that we assume that audiences know all of these things, and a little peek behind the curtain for anybody, not just children, I think is good to help them understand how much goes into putting on an opera, how many different skills are needed, and how many different people are needed. And I also think that, some young person in the audience could say, oh, well, maybe I'm not a singer, but maybe I want to be a lesbian stage manager.
Or a straight stage manager. We cannot discriminate. Possibly a bisexual stage manager. We don't know.
I know you've been involved in education, and we used to do our own company together where we always thought about audience education. What do you think is a good strategy for learn in the audience?
I don't think there's one right way to do it. I think any of these things require sort of multi-pronged approaches. I really appreciate the sort of behind the scenes and then put all of the components together that Atelier is doing. I also really appreciate the create your own operas that some of these youth outreach programs do that kind of get the kids sort of doing stuff on their feet. Because again, I think what we're trying to do is sort of remove the air of unfamiliarity. And so that's what Atelier's approach does. That's what doing, these sort of getting the kids up and moving and being a part of it on their feet. But then also there's a little bit of sort of sneaking the vegetables into the pizza that has to happen in a couple of different places so that, you don't directly let them know they're doing something that's not familiar. You sort of sneak that in, which actually leads me to a really interesting article that I was going to mention at a different point in the show, but I will go ahead and do it now. So Tom Service, who writes in classical music for The Guardian, has written an article in the last week called "Can Bluey Save Classical Music?" So if you're not familiar, Bluey is a cartoon show. I believe it's Australian. The episodes are these short bursts. It's one of the most beautiful, heartwarming, emotionally intelligent. It's the way we want to teach our children. And so this article actually focuses on the person who creates all of the music for these episodes, a composer named Geoff Bush, and how often he is quoting classical music in these episodes. He's creating all of the music, but there are all of these throwbacks to Rondo a la Turk. He's quoting Bach. He's quoting Beethoven. He is doing Brandenburg's Fifth Concerto and Concerto a Due Cori in one of the episodes. So he's really shoving in, kind of in a young person's guide to the orchestra for the modern era way, all of these different bits of classical music. And so it's a really excellent article. It's in The Guardian this week. It's called "Can Bluey Save Classical Music?" It is behind a free account. You do have to have an account to read this article, but it's pretty excellent. It's very similar to the way that many of us in yours and my era sort of one of the first ways that we learned about classical music but didn't realize it was through Looney Tunes, was through Tom and Jerry, was through Bugs Bunny. The first time that we heard, anything Valkyrie related, we learned it as kill the rabbit, kill the rabbit. So there are ways to sort of sneak those things in. But again, to Atelier's point, I think it's got to be a multi-pronged approach. We're not going to be able to learn into the children or learn into the other folks in just one way. So we will go ahead and throw that link for Can Bluey Save Classical Music up on our website, operaboxscore.com. And while you're there reading this fascinating article about classical music, you can help us spread the word about Opera Box Score. You can give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I prefer if they're positive, but you know what? If you need to be honest and give us a just okay review, that's fine too. If you have a few extra moments, go ahead and write a specific review. Again, this is Ashley and Oliver, your diehard hosts for this week. So if you're going to write that positive review, be sure to give us a shout out. At any rate, the next thing I'm going to shout out is the 2-minute drill.
This just in. The 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
A coalition of preservation and architecture organizations has filed a lawsuit to halt renovations to the Kennedy Center, arguing that the Trump administration failed to comply with historic preservation laws and obtain required congressional approval. The lawsuit seeks to stop any demolition or major design changes, citing concerns that the scope of renovations has been understated. The groups also allege quote-unquote anticipatory demolition, claiming the exterior was repainted and Trump's name added to the facade without approval. According to prior reports, the center does require major infrastructure upgrades, but plaintiffs stress that federal law mandates transparency and review before altering a national cultural landmark.
Teatro Massimo di Palermo canceled French conductor Frédéric Chazlan's involvement in Aida after concerns regarding Chazlan's alleged ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Reports say musicians were uneasy during earlier rehearsals, prompting internal discussions and Chazlan's release despite no formal contract. Chazlan has denied wrongdoing.
The retiring concertmaster of the Baltimore Symphony has quote-unquote won a portion of his suit against violinist and Dear Lara filmmaker Lara St. John that involved taking down a Facebook post. It's so messy a headline can't unpack it. Ashley will try after the drill.
In major awards news, Emily D'Angelo has been honored with the Glenn Gould Foundation Protégé Prize, personally selected by this year's Glenn Gould Prize laureate, Elton John. As part of the Glenn Gould Prize, each laureate selects an outstanding young artist who shows the promise of an exceptional lifetime contribution to enriching the human condition through the arts to become a protégé.
At last week's Opera America Salutes Awards dinner, 3 friends of the show were inducted into the Opera Hall of Fame, not to be confused with the OBS Hall of Fame. Librettist Mark Campbell, mezzo-soprano and teacher Denise Graves, and arts administrator and director Francesca Zambello joined fellow inductees Donnie Ray Albert, Christopher Hahn, Susan F. and William C. Morris, and Bernard and Barbara Osher as the 9 exemplary artists, administrators, and advocates honored at the Class of 2025 celebration. Somehow, our invitation must have gotten lost. Nominations for the next cycle of Opera America's Hall of Fame will be invited this spring. To submit nominations, use the link on the webpage for this episode at operaboxscore.com, and it's spelled CAMACHO.
In trade news, the University of Michigan School of Music, Theater, and Dance has announced that friend of the show and hair care bestie Christine Gerke will join the Department of Voice and Opera as an assistant professor beginning this August. In a long and illustrious career, Ms. Gerke has appeared with virtually every major opera house and symphony orchestra in the world, says Department Chair Stephen West. Ms. Gerke, who often describes herself as a dramatic soprano and soccer mom, but not necessarily in that order, has strong connections to the Detroit and Ann Arbor areas, and we've been fortunate to have her share her expertise with us in appearances and master classes. We now wholeheartedly welcome her as a world-renowned voice professor.
English National Opera has appointed Paul Reeve, member of the Order of the British Empire, as interim chief executive, while the board completes the search for a permanent CEO. Reeve has held senior roles at Into Film, the Royal Ballet and Opera, English Touring Opera, the Royal Shakespeare Company, and Birmingham Royal Ballet.
The Salzburg Festival announced that artistic director Markus Hinterhäuser will step down effective immediately due to irreconcilable differences. Hinterhäuser will remain on leave through the end of his contract. Until a successor is named, President Christina Hammer and commercial director Lukas Krepash will lead the 2026 festival.
Crunching the numbers, the Recording Industry Association of America has released its 2025 year-end recorded music revenue report, highlighting a resurgence in vinyl sales. U.S. vinyl revenue surpassed $1 billion for the first time since 1983, with sales up 9.3% year over year and accounting for nearly half of the global market. Streaming remains dominant, representing 82% of U.S. music revenue in 2025 and generating $6.4 billion from 106.5 million accounts.
On the disabled list, Golda Schultz has withdrawn from the Salzburg Easter Festival, where she was scheduled to appear alongside friend of the show Liv Redpath and other soloists in Mahler's 8th Symphony with the Berlin Philharmonic conducted by Kirill Petrenko. Cancellations are never easy, but a necessary step towards restful recovery, said the South African soprano on Instagram. I hope to be back on stage soon. And Natalia Romani has canceled upcoming performances of Tosca at Glyndebourne due to pregnancy. Romani explained on social media that rehearsals beginning in July would not allow sufficient recovering time following medical advice. Romani expressed gratitude to Glyndebourne and extended best wishes to her replacement, Caitlin Gottemer.
Exit stage right. Opera Nova Bydgoszcz has announced that Polish tenor Janusz Ratajczak, a longtime soloist with the company, died in a car accident in Poland on March 23rd. Born in 1962, Ratajczak was a graduate of the Academy of Music in Bydgoszcz, taught classical singing in Poland, and performed more than 50 roles with Opera Nova. Notable highlights included Don José, which earned a Golden Mask Award, and the title role in Paderewski's Monroe, recorded in 2001.
And on this day, April 2nd, some firsts here. 1720 was when the Royal Academy opened in London with a performance of Giovanni Porta's Nutimore. 1798 brought us the first performance of Haydn's oratorio The Creation in Vienna. 1842, stateside, saw the founding of the New York Philharmonic Orchestra, the oldest symphony orchestra in the U.S. Also over here in 1877 was the first performance in America of Wagner's Valkyrie at the Academy of Music in New York City. 1939, on this day, Maria Callas undertook the part of Santuzza in a student production of Mascagni's Cavalleria Rusticana by the Greek National Opera. And on this day in 1948 was the first performance of Karl Hartmann's opera Simplicius Simplicissimus, one for Weston, in concert performance at the Bavarian Radio in Munich.
Birthdays on April 2nd include composer Giacomo Gottifredo Ferrari, born in 1763, English bass and composer Willoughby Hunter Weiss, born this day in 1820. His claim to fame was that he set a Longfellow poem, What a Difference a Tree Makes, as a song, and made a fortune doing that, but his other compositions are forgotten. In 1828, baritone Mark Bonnehey was born. He created the role of Guy de Montfort in Verdi's Vespri Siciliani. In 1861, Ernst van Dyck, the tenor, was born in Antwerp. He's Belgian. He created the title role in Massenet's Werther. In 1892, German baritone Rudolf Bockelmann was born. He created roles in operas by Koenig, which I'm sure Weston knows all about. In 1905, Austrian conductor Kurt Adler was born in Vienna. In 1928, English soprano April Cantell was born, who sang in the premiere of Britain's Midsummer Night's Dream. And in 1930, it was the birth of English mezzo-soprano Barbro Erickson, who sang in the premiere of Ligeti's Le Grand Macabre. We miss you, Weston.
And that's your 2-minute drill.
Since it's Holy Week, and maybe you're listening to this episode as you drive to your Easter celebration, a little bit of the Easter hymn from Cavalleria Rusticana from the 1953 La Scala studio recording featuring Maria Callas with Tullio Serafin conducting. That probably came out on vinyl, huh?
Yes, interesting things in the news this week, but let's talk about yay vinyl. That's so crazy, that stat that it's up, that it's the highest it's been since like 1983. I would just like to say that I bought 3 vinyl records last year, so I helped. Were any of them classical? Yes, one was. So yes, I absolutely helped. But more importantly, my unofficial role as chief legal correspondent this week is really getting a workout. Let's see if we can unpack some of this Lara St. John business. Okay, for those of you who are just catching up, Lara St. John is a violinist. She is the person who did the documentary Dear Lara that has just come out that talks about sexual improprieties in classical music. And so this is what's going on with this lawsuit. So Jonathan Carney, in January of last year, 25, he announced that he was going to retire as concertmaster of the Baltimore Symphony. Baltimore Symphony we've heard about from who? Catherine Needleman. More on that later. So he says he's going to retire at the end of the 2026-2027 season. And the orchestra was going to give him its first honorary title, which was Concertmaster Laureate. This didn't necessarily sit well with the violinist Lara St. John, who took to social media to criticize the decision about granting Carney this title. Again, she's got her finger on the pulse of improprieties in this world, and Carney is in no way exempt from any of that. There have been long-standing allegations that go all the way back 20 years that Carney has propositioned people. He's put really unfair promotions and not so much promotions in place for women based on sort of what they have been willing to do for him. So it claimed in her post a few things about how women in the orchestra had been asked for sex. She referenced our friend Catherine Needleman, the orchestra's principal oboist, who had reportedly refused an advance like that years earlier. Needleman herself had put out the full text of a complaint that she put out in 2018 with the Equal Opportunity Commission. More on that later. So Carney, once he hears about this post that happens in January of last year, in March of last year, he files a defamation lawsuit against Lara St. John in federal court in New York. In October, Lara tried to get the court to dismiss the case, ruling that statements in the post were things that she knew from people that had told her and reported them. he files and says, no, this is something that needs to go forward. The court denies St. John's request to dismiss the case, saying that there are factual statements that could be proven true or false. Carney and his team, petty princesses that they are, identify 13 statements in this Facebook post as false and damaging, including things about sexual misconduct, professional behavior, and even, yes, musical ability. So, one of the things that comes out of the settlement of this suit, a key condition, is that Lara has to retract statements that were not based on what are called, quote, first-hand knowledge, and an agreement to stop making further public claims. So she posted a retraction on Facebook. She said that no false information was knowingly shared and that she would remove the original post. So the case has been settled somewhat. St. John has removed the original Facebook post from January of 2025. She has also declined to comment further. But again, if that's what's winning, I don't really know if it's winning. Apparently Baltimore's going to go ahead and give him this title, but it has been Messica Simpson's 6 Ways to Sunday trying to figure out the ins and outs of this case. But basically, he is touting that he won because Lara St. John had to take down a Facebook post from 15 months ago. So that is the unpacking of that lawsuit. Moving on to our next lawsuit, the lawsuit against... The lawsuit against the Trump administration trying to prevent them from doing any further what we will call abominations and damages to the Kennedy Center. The one way to sum up this lawsuit is duh. Basically, the lawsuit is saying, hey, there are rules and regulations in place and they're not following any of them. Shocking. Film at 11. Of course, we know this. But what they're really trying to say is that Congress isn't doing their job in stopping this. So we, as a group of preservation and architecture organizations, are going to file suit in court to try to pull in some injunctions to actually stop further demolition, further damage. The infrastructure does need some upgrades at the Kennedy Center, but there are ways and rules and procedures to go about doing that, especially a cultural landmark that was established through an act of Congress, and only additional acts of Congress can really do the types of adjustments that this administration is trying to do. So yes, this lawsuit, it's just one big duh. We will see if the judge sides with him. I'm assuming that they will. But again, as we've seen, this administration doesn't necessarily pay attention to, rules or regulations or procedures or morals or ethics. So we'll see what happens there. But that's your legal roundup for the week.
Well, I think we did it. I think it's time to wrap this show up.
Let's wrap this show up.
Good call. Bad call on Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call. The way we close out every show, we will do the same this week. Oliver Camacho.
So there are a couple of think pieces out there about the Met's current production of Tristan und Isolde. I'm going to recommend the one by Garth Greenwell, friend of the show and author, called An Opera Against Life. I agree with many of the points that it makes, and it's very kind in how it talks about what's going on at the Met and maybe the challenges of the Yuval Sharon production and the particular skill sets of the singers cast in that production. And I also want to, bad call for my financial ability right now to go to Toronto. I desperately want to see this production of Pelléas and Melisande at Opera Atelier, and I checked out plane ticket prices for that particular week in April, and I just can't swing it, having just gotten back from New York. So if there is a listener out there who really wants me to see this show, go to operaboxscore.com and find a way to donate to Opera Box Score. And maybe you can send me to see Pelléas and I can come back and tell you about it and cry all about it. So that's up to you.
Donate airline miles, donate funds. We can try Porter Airlines. They drop you right in the middle of downtown. It's quite the thing. My calls this week. One is going to be a callback to something we talked about earlier. Hey, go watch an episode of Bluey. It's 7 minutes. It is so heartening and wonderful. They're all delightful. It's stuff we all need reminders of. They're 7 minutes, and there will be classical music throwbacks. So that was my heartfelt one. My ridiculous one is Oh, it's so niche and so specific. So if you're on the app that is Threads, Threads is kind of like the meta answer to Twitter in terms of short burst text reporting. There is something that happened over the weekend, a phenomenon. It's the only thing I can call it is a phenomenon called Bro Cruise. And so there is a woman who is friends with a gentleman who was part of a bachelor party weekend. They were going to go on a cruise together, and the lack of planning from all of these men had her and her friend crashing out. So he was reporting live on all of the things that were happening in the absolute disarray and disorganization of grown adult men trying to go on vacation together. It is unhinged. It was wonderful. And even though I was on a family vacation, I was glued to my phone waiting for Bro Cruise updates. I fully expect a series to come out of this. No woman is surprised at the absolute insane level of incompetence that's there, but also it's absolutely worth looking at and reading. So if you're on Threads, go to Bro Cruise. You know what? Just Google the words Bro Cruise. I'm certain there have been some think pieces written, even though this happened 3 days ago. That is it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio, show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get your voice heard, and you can find links to stuff that we've talked about on our website, which is operaboxscore.com. That is also where you can donate United Miles to Oliver's plight to get to Toronto. That is also where you can put your money where our mouths are. Give back to the OBS using that Support the Team tab. Your announcer is Norm Waddell. Your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. And your audio editor is Weston Williams. The executive producer of OBS is George Cedarquist. For our guests, Marshall Pynkowski and Jeannette Lajeunesse Zingg, I am Ashley Hardgrave, asking you to continue the conversation about opera as you drag your co-star across the stage gently by the hair. We're back with an all-new show next week when countertenor Randall Scotting takes a free throw on his new album Divine Impresario. Plus, you'll get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more lawsuits to stop the demolition of a cultural landmark. Join us.